Alright, we're going to be designing a landing page that looks a lot like this. This is going to be a series, and for the first part, we're just going to design this hero section that you see here. So we're going to start off by creating a NextJS app. I'm going to use TypeScript and Tailwind, and for everything else, I'm just going to use default options. And now I just open up VS Code. First things first, I'm going to delete all of this default code that we have here. In here as well, I'm going to delete everything. Yeah, we don't need any of this. We just need that one line to import Tailwind, and that's it. So I created a components folder. And let's just run this right now and see what we have so far. There we go. And right now it's just a blank page. So we're going to start by creating a super header, which is the element you see above the nav bar. I'm going to remove all of these classes, and I'm going to import and add the super header here. Okay, it's being rendered properly. I'm also going to create a container element just so we can neatly organize our elements. And it's going to take a children prop, which will be a React node. And then I'll just render the children here. And what is this error? Okay, this is not how you do it. Yeah. Okay, like this. We also don't need this read-only property, so yeah, this is unnecessary. So I'll just remove that as well. And here I'll just add a class of max width about, let's say, yeah, this much. And then just margin auto. That's all we need for there. And here I'll add a background color of yellow 200. And now I'll just use the container we built earlier and put all of the children inside there. We're going to create a flexbox with item center and justify between, and just add some gap. Now inside here I'm going to create another div, and this is compose icons. It is just an icon library. I'm going to get a currency icon. Let's see which one of these looks good. This one maybe. Actually, I'm just going to go with this from hero icons. Now, before rendering the icon, I'm going to store all of my icons in a new icons.tsx file, just so they're a lot more organized. We're going to export icons, and I'll put all of my icons in this file. Now also I'm going to add a label for screen readers just so these icons are accessible. We're going to use the SR only class, which basically means that this element will only show up if screen readers are using it. Okay, that's done. Now we can use this icon. I'll import it and use it over here. And there we go. We see it on the page. I'm going to add some padding here just so it looks nicer. About this much. Yeah, that looks fine. I'm also going to increase the shade of yellow here. And now we're just going to add the name of the currency right next to the icon. We need to use Flexbox here again just to arrange this. I'll add a tiny bit of gap as well. Or maybe not. Okay, now it's too congested. So maybe we will have some form of gap. And then just show the currency here. Now next we're going to create another child. And here I'll just add the coupon information. Sort of like an announcement section. And the coupon code, I'm going to make it bold so it's more prominent. There we go. And one more child. Here I'm just going to create login and sign up buttons. Okay, let's see. Yeah, I'm going to use Flexbox here as well and add a bunch of gap here. That should be fine. I'm also going to add a separator here. And that looks a lot nicer. Maybe we don't need to use the full currency name. That looks fine. Okay, I guess I'll use it. And yeah, that's mostly it for the super header component. Next, we're going to create a navbar component that's going to go right below this. Alright, now let's make this navbar. So first things first, I'm just going to render this on our page. And there we go, you can see it being rendered here. Next, I'm going to replace this with a container. We're going to put everything in a container. Now I'll create a div with a flex box, add some gap just for styling. And here I'm going to create the brand link. I'm going to add some styling to this, make it big, and also the body text, I'm going to make that orange, just so it looks a bit nicer. Remove this space and add the color to this. orange 600, and that looks a lot nicer. Now we also want to add some margin, or actually some padding, just to add some white space and make these elements look better. To create the actual links in the navbar, and I'm also going to change this to a nav element, just so we're using proper semantic HTML. And we're going to make this a flexbox as well. We're going to make everything a flexbox. First link is destinations, then travel packages, flights and hotels, and yeah, they're being rendered. Flights and hotels, there we go. Travel guides, about us, and contact us. And that's all the links we need. Now finally, I'm going to add a bunch of icons here. First, a search icon. I'm going to use this let's use this one from Lucide. We'll put this in icons.tsx again. And of course, make sure to add the label for screen readers as well. Search icon, there we go. I'm also going to add a heart icon. So this is going to be like if you want to view your favorites, your favorite places, your wish list, something like that. Again, make sure you add the label for screen readers. Heart icon. Okay, those are the two icons we need. Now I'm going to render both of them in a button. First the search icon, and now the heart icon. And there we go. We'll turn this into a flexbox as well, and add some gap between both of those icons. And that looks a lot nicer. Okay, that's enough gap. Yeah, I'm just experimenting with how much gap I should add. I'm also going to add a CTA button over here. Shop now or book a flight. Now let's add some styling to this to make this more prominent. I'm going to make it rounded as well, and add a lot of padding. And also make the text a bit bigger. And make the font semi-bold. That looks good. We'll go with that. Let's also add hover effects. If you hover, let's change it to orange 500. Also, let's add a duration, just so it's a bit more smooth. And let's also change the cursor to a pointer when we hover over it. That's all for this button. Let's also do the same thing for the heart and the search icons. When I hover over them, I want to see a pointer. That's all we need for the nav bar. Now to design the hero section. And I'm just going to render this here, first things first. Now I need to find a good image for the hero section. This is going to take a while. Okay, I sped that up a bit because it took forever to find a good image, and now we have to deal with this error. So basically it can't find the image. Okay, so the solution is to have one copy of the images folder in your SRC folder and one copy in your public folder. You need both of these to make this work. Okay, with that done, we're going to add some padding to this image, and we're going to add BJ center and BJ cover just to make this look a bit nicer. The padding is just temporary so we can actually see the image. Once we fill this with content, we won't need the padding so much. And as always, I'm going to put everything in a container. We're going to add our headline over here. Now we're going to make this bigger because this isn't big enough yet. Let's try 8XL. That looks big enough. We're also going to constrain its width. That's too small. That's also too small. Let's make it XL. And that's good enough. Now we also want to add sufficient line height just to make it look a bit nicer. Let's go with snug. And that looks fine. Now I want to add a transparent overlay, a blackish overlay to this whole image so we can read this text a bit better. I'm going to reduce the padding a bit. There we go. And I'm going to create an absolute positioned element that's going to take up this whole container. And we can see if it's working correctly by just adding a background. And as you can see, it fills up the whole image. So we know it's working correctly. Now I'm going to add a gradient here to the bottom left. and we're going to go from, let's say, gray 900 to gray 50. Okay, that's not what we want. Let's try top right. Still not what we want. So let's try bottom right. Okay, that's correct. Now let's reduce the opacity so we can actually see the content below this. Okay, so it turns out we use a different class for background opacity in Tailwind v4. So let's fix what we wrote here. I'll try using 50% opacity for starters. And that looks kinda okay. Let's try 10%. Still not perfect. Let's try a different color. Okay, I'm actually going to use what Spotify uses for their albums. They basically use this linear gradient, and I'm going to do the same thing over here. So instead of gray, we're going to use this color, which is just a transparent shade of black. And here we're going to use a transparent shade of white. And that looks a lot better. So now this headline is a lot more readable as well, but it's not selectable. This absolute element is covering everything up. So we're going to use Z-index to move this to the bottom. And let me just play around with the opacity a bit. Okay, now let's fix this selection issue. So this headline is currently below the absolute positioned element, and we need to fix that. Now we're going to use Z-index to actually fix it, but that's going to actually make the overlay invisible. So what we need to do is add an isolate class to the parent. And without going into too much detail, this is just going to make sure that the overlay is below the text, but it is still visible. Now let's reduce the padding a bit more. Let's do 40. That looks good. And now let's add a big CTA button right below the headline. I'm going to add some styling to this, similar to what we had in the nav bars button. And I'm going to make this a white button. Let's make it bold, and let's also make the text a bit bigger. Let's remove this line height because I think it doesn't look good. And let's add a margin to separate this from the button. Okay, this should be good enough. I'm going to increase the padding a bit just to make this even bigger, and also increase the text size. And I'm also going to add an icon here just to show that this is opening a new link. Let's use this one. And as always, I'm going to put this in the icons.tsx file. Let's call this external link. And of course, we make sure to add the screen label for screen readers. External link icon. Okay. Now let's put this text in a span and render the icon here right next to it. We're also going to need flexbox here to arrange both of these. And that looks better. But the icon is not centered. So let's try to fix that as well. Okay, items end seems to work. This looks good enough, but let's see if we can make this relative and make it even more perfect. Okay, that's too much. So I think I'm just going to leave it as it is. I'm going to remove this relative positioning and just use what we have here. Now I am going to change the color to match the site's color, orange 600. Okay, 700 is too dark. Let's use 600. And that's pretty much all we need for the CTA button. I'm just going to turn the text uppercase and reduce the text size a bit. And make this bold. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, it looks fine. Now moving on. Finally, for this section, I'm going to add a subheader, citing adventures, unforgettable memories. There we go. Make this white just to match the rest of the section. I'm instead just going to use Flexbox again and move all of these in there. And we actually need to use flex call. That's the correct name for the class. I'm going to move this button inside a div just to make this an inline element. And let's reduce the padding again. That's too much. Let's go with 20. And that looks fine. Now to move this text to the bottom, I'm going to add a margin top. And that seems to work. Now, moving on, I'm going to add a bit of gap between these elements, and I'm going to move the heading and the button in its own element. So instead of using margin top, we're just going to use the gap property. And let's make this text a bit bigger as well. And make it semi-bold. And also constrain its width to, let's say, MD. And that looks fine. Let's increase the text size a bit more. And alright, this is starting to come along really nicely. I'm going to increase the container width and that looks a bit nicer. Now let's also add some hover effects to this CTA button. Let's say on hover we want to change its color to Slate 100, and we also want to change the cursor to a pointer. Okay, this is way too subtle, so I'll increase this to Slate 200. And that's a bit nicer. Now, lastly, I'm going to change the font for this website. This is something we should have done right from the start, but we're going to use the Poppins font. I'm just going to import this into the project, get rid of this Ubuntu Mono, get the embed code, and then just import this in our project. There we go. Now we also need to set Tailwind to actually use this font, and that should work. Ignore that warning in the IDE, it means nothing. Okay, so there's an error. We actually need to move this import rule to the top, and that should work. And there we go, that looks a lot better with this font. And yeah, those were the only finishing touches we needed. If I inspect this page here, we should be able to see that the font is correctly being used right here by using the Poppins font. So this is working properly. And yeah, this is the final page.